There are places on this planet where the world doesn't feel like it belongs to us anymore, where the air is so cold it doesn't just sting, it erases. Sound travels weird, time slows down, and the horizon looks like a knife. Now imagine this. It's the mid-1800s. Two ships go into that white nothingness, packed with food, coal, tools, books, even a small library, and 129 men who believe they're about to make history, but yet they don't come back. No survivors, no final eyewitness, just silence and the ice. Tonight, I'm going to tell you the true story of one of history's darkest disappearances, the Franklin expedition. This story is a retelling of real historical events. That means the timeline, locations, and key facts are true. But some small moments, internal thoughts, and bits of dialogue are imagined to stitch the record together, because the Arctic didn't leave us a neat ending. It left us fragments. And that's part of what makes this story so terrifying. We know enough to see the shape of what happened, but not enough to hear the final screams. Picture Britain in the 1840s. This is an era where maps still have blank spaces. Not because the world is unknown, but because the world is unclaimed. The oceans are highways. Empires measure power by what they can name. And up in the Arctic, there's a prize, the Northwest Passage, a sea route through the top of North America that would shorten trade routes, shift economies, and crown whoever found it with fame that outlived death. People had tried. People had failed. Some came back missing fingers, toes, sanity. Some didn't come back at all. But the Royal Navy, confident and hungry for legacy, prepares another push. Not a small one, not a cautious one, a bold one, a statement. They choose a leader who feels like a final answer. Sir John Franklin, a seasoned officer, a man already known for Arctic travel, a man with reputation, and, this matters, a man in his late 50s carrying the weight of previous expeditions like old scars. The plan is straightforward on paper. Sail into the Arctic, find the passage, chart it, claim it, return heroes. The reality is, the Arctic doesn't care about papered. In May of 1845, two ships are outfitted for the job, HMS Erebus and HMS Terror. Their names alone feel like foreshadowing, don't they? Erebus, a word tied to darkness in ancient myth. Terror, a word that doesn't need explanation. These aren't fragile little sailboats. They're sturdy bomb vessels refitted for exploration, built to take punishment. Reinforced hulls, supplies for years, coal for auxiliary steam engines. And they don't pack like people expecting to barely survive. They pack like people expecting to live normally in a floating world for a long time. They bring canned food by the ton. They bring warm clothing. They bring tools, instruments, medicine. They bring books, paper, ink, the comforts of civilization. Because that's how humans survive the unthinkable. We pretend it's going to be manageable. In the summer, they sail into Baffin Bay. They're seen by whalers, the last reliable outsiders to ever lay eyes on them. After that, the Arctic takes over. If you look at a map, you can trace the logic, thread through channels, hug coastlines, push west, find open water. But the map doesn't show the real enemy. The enemy is time. Because in the Arctic, winter isn't a season. It's a verdict. The expedition winters early on. The first winter likely passes with discipline, routine, schedules, men still believing they are part of a grand plan. This is the part of the story that's easy to romanticize. Two proud ships, locked in ice like museum pieces. Lantern light glowing behind frosted windows. Officers writing neat lines in logbooks while the world outside becomes a pale, endless night. But even early on, the Arctic begins doing what it always does. It makes small things huge. A slightly damp glove becomes frostbite. A tiny cough becomes pneumonia. A minor injury becomes an infection. A missed resupply becomes starvation months later. And the psychological part is worse. Imagine weeks of darkness, the sun skimming the horizon or never rising at all. Wind that sounds like a living thing circling your ship. Ice that moans and shifts under pressure, as if something enormous is turning in its sleep. Now imagine you're trying to sleep on a wooden ship while the world squeezes you like a fist, you'd start to feel it, wouldn't you? That you are not visiting the Arctic. You are being allowed to exist there, temporarily. The plan depends on movement. Movement depends on melt. Melt depends on luck. And then the bad luck becomes consistent. The ships push deeper into the maze of channels near what is now Nunavut. And at some point, the ice closes in so hard that it doesn't let go. Not for a week, not for a month, for years. Think about what that means. 2 ships packed with supplies turned into stationary prisons. At first, that might not feel fatal. You have food, you have coal, you have order. But the longer you sit, the more every number changes. Every day is a subtraction problem. Calories, fuel, medicine, morale. And once the ship becomes a place where nothing changes, the men become clocks counting down. This is where the story becomes darker, because the record becomes thinner. We don't have a full diary of every day. What we have is evidence, and evidence doesn't speak gently. Here's what historians suspect began to compound. 1. Illness and exposure. Even with preparation, Arctic winters are brutal. Frostbite, respiratory illness, scurvy, if fresh food becomes scarce. 2. Food that isn't as safe as promised. Canned food was new technology then. Large-scale canning for an expedition of this size was ambitious. And if anything was improperly sealed or contaminated, you don't always know until it's too late. 3. Poisoning, slow, invisible. There is evidence that some crew members suffered from lead exposure. And lead poisoning is the kind of enemy you can't punch. It makes you tired, confused, irritable. It wrecks judgment. It turns organization into chaos, and chaos in the Arctic is a death sentence for the mental collapse. This might be the biggest factor and the easiest to underestimate. The Arctic doesn't just kill bodies, it kills certainty. When a man stops believing rescue is possible, he begins making desperate choices. When a crew loses trust in routine, routine stops working. And when your whole plan is, we will remain disciplined until the ice frees us, the moment discipline cracks, everything else follows. You can almost picture it. A man staring at the ice beyond the ship's rail, realizing it looks the same today as it did last month. The same white, the same pressure ridges, the same frozen horizon. And in that sameness, a terrifying thought. What if it never opened? Now we arrive at one of the most chilling pieces of evidence in polar exploration history. A written message left in a cairn, a kind of stone mailbox in the Arctic. It tells us that Franklin died. It tells us the ships were trapped. It tells us the men made a decision. And that decision is the point where this story stops being an expedition and becomes a slow-motion disaster. At some point, after endless waiting, the surviving crew abandons the ships. Try to feel the weight of that. Those ships were their shelter, their heat, their storage, their last link to the world they came from. Abandoning them means the Arctic has won the argument. It means you are stepping off your last island of civilization into a frozen wilderness on foot, with whatever you can carry. And you're doing it because staying put has become worse than the unknown. That is how hopeless it had to feel. Now picture it. A line of exhausted men in heavy clothing, hauling sledges. Some are sick, some are injured, some are starving. They are dragging boats over ice because if they reach water later, they'll need to continue. The land is flat in a way that messes with your depth perception. The cold steals moisture with every breath. Your eyelashes freeze, your beard becomes a cage of ice, and you are marching toward a destination that, on the map, looks possible. But on the ground, everything is farther than it should be. Distance in the Arctic is deceitful. A mile can feel like 10. A nearby inlet can become an all-day crawl. And there's another nightmare layer here. Even if you are walking towards safety, you are doing it while your body becomes less capable of walking. Your strength shrinks. Your hands lose feeling. Small injuries become permanent. Decision-making becomes fog. And once decision-making goes, a group can die very quickly, because then you don't just lose food or heat, you lose direction. No one from Franklin's expedition is known to have survived. Over time, searchers found traces, scattered camps, abandoned equipment remains in places that suggested the crew tried to keep moving. There are also accounts and evidence that suggest, at the very end, some men may have resorted to desperate measures to stay alive. That detail is often what people fixate on. But I think the more haunting truth is simpler. They were beaten by environment, time, and compounding failures. The Arctic doesn't need monsters. It has patience. And when you're trapped long enough, patience becomes a weapon. Back home, the silence becomes impossible to ignore, written expected triumph. Instead, months pass, then years. Search expeditions go out. They find hints, fragments, graves, tools, notes. And woven through much of this story, and this matters, is the knowledge and guidance of Inuit communities who understood the land in a way outsiders never could. The Franklin story becomes a national obsession, a symbol of ambition, and a warning about arrogance. Because the expedition wasn't small, it wasn't reckless in obvious ways. It was equipped, experienced, backed by an empire. And still, it vanished. Which means the lesson isn't, don't try. The lesson is, the world can swallow you even when you do everything right. In the modern era, the wrecks of the ships were eventually found. Erebus first, then Terror, resting under cold water like time capsules. You can look at the images and feel something unsettling. These weren't myths, these weren't ghost stories. These were real ships with real hallways, real doors, real bunks where men once lay awake listening to ice press against wood. And somewhere in that frozen silence, the past is still present because the Arctic preserves what it takes. It keeps the evidence. It keeps the bones. It keeps the names. It just doesn't give them back on your schedule. If you ever want to understand how fragile human plans are, don't look at a battlefield. Look at a map. Look at the blank spaces people thought they could conquer. And remember, the Franklin expedition didn't lose to an enemy with a face. It lost to cold and time and a place that doesn't care what you believe. This is Horror Story Society, and you made it to the end. If you felt that chill, hit like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.